it's a big question to ask yourself. And I think what we're all guilty of doing is thinking that it's one static thing in life.
Absolutely right. Yes, I agree.
Your purpose is always evolving.
Totally right.
And I think if we say to ourselves, like, I don't know what my purpose is, I don't know what I need to do in life, I don't know what my legacy is going to be, I think we put too much pressure on what a purpose is.
Izzy Prior, welcome to the Purpose-Led Leadership Podcast. Delighted to have you on the show. We've become friends on LinkedIn and you introduced me properly by our joint VA, which is great.
Definitely.
Really impressed with your growth on LinkedIn. I want to talk about that. But for those that don't know you, I mean, you've got 58,000 followers. Tell us what you do now.
Okay, so I am a purpose-led entrepreneur similar to yourself, Chris. And I started an agency about 2.5 years ago. Have an employee now and we're expanding as the years go on. We help in the personal branding space, impact-led CEOs to really create their personal brands on LinkedIn and beyond. But also, I'm really tapping into my purpose at the moment in speaking engagements and really helping other people to embrace who they are. And that's really important to me.
See, that's fascinating. This is the Purpose-Led Leadership Podcast. I talk about purpose a hell of a lot, as you just said, but I think a lot of people undervalue purpose, don't even know what it necessarily is, and don't get the importance of it. What's your view of purpose?
So I had a conversation recently with my brother. He was looking in the recruitment space after graduating university, and he is very much a money-driven person. We had a conversation over the dinner table, and I realised I am not a money-driven person. Of course, money is the tool to freedom. It's the tool to experiences, to live in life, to finding and meeting your purpose. And I'll dig into what that means in a second. But I realized that mine is more meaningful. I'm impact driven. So as the years have gone on and as my business has gone on, I really had to work out and look inside myself and realize, what am I going to achieve? What am I setting out to do? Why do I wake up in the morning and get out of bed in the morning? I went to Asia earlier on this year and I really found out what my purpose was. Quite an interesting story, sitting on a random cliff in the middle of an island in Thailand.
Nice.
And I think when you ask yourself, like, purpose, it's a small word. It's a, 6-letter word. 6 letters, I think it is.
7, isn't it?
7 letters. Okay. But it's a big question to ask yourself. And I think what we're all guilty of doing is thinking that it's one static thing in life.
Absolutely right. Yes, I agree.
Your purpose is always evolving.
Totally right.
And I think if we say to ourselves, like, I don't know what my purpose is, I don't know what I need to do in life, I don't know what my legacy is going to be, I think we put too much pressure on what a purpose is. And I think, last year, I think I could have said a completely different thing. I wanted to be a successful business owner in my small town.
Yes.
And that was limited to that.
Yes.
And this year, I've realised I'm beyond that. I want to exceed that.
I think it's a very, very perceptive view, because having had different goals, objectives and motivations myself, I've been a multimillionaire, I've lost it all, I've been poor, I've been rich, I've been wealthy, I've done all the different things, and my purpose has certainly evolved. And I think I don't think you ever find yourself where you find your purpose, but it does make me laugh when I see people just striving for that next office, next car, number of followers. I want to get to 100,000 followers. I want to do this. And I've been guilty of this myself. It's like, when I get this, I'm going to feel this. And I think purpose is about, yes, having a destination and goals that can change, but I don't think it's ever permanent. Your situation changes, you move and evolve. So as cheesy as it sounds, I think being present and enjoying the journey is much better than hoping the destination is going to be the answer, because it never is, right?
100%. And I was exactly the same as you. When I hit 10,000 followers, I was like, right, what's next? What's the 20,000 followers? What's the next, podcast I'm going on? What's the next, who's the next client I'm going to onboard? What's the next milestone I'm going to meet? And I never really sat back and gave myself a pat on the back and went, well done. It's only when I came back to my hometown and spoke to friends that I went to college with who went, what are you doing these days? And talk about what you're doing. And speaking to new people, did I go and reflect on the successes I had? Because perhaps maybe LinkedIn does that to you and the business world does that to you. There's always someone better. There's always someone doing better than you. And what's it called? Comparisonitis.
Comparison's a thief of joy, isn't it? On the LinkedIn point, obviously you've done phenomenally well. I want to talk to you and delve. I'm sure the audience want to know how you've got to the level you got, but I think LinkedIn, and I know LinkedIn's been absolutely phenomenal for me in terms of business, in life, connections, friends that I've made, and without it, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. But I also think you can have too much of a good thing as well. I've seen some of your posts about screen time and stuff like that. I feel that I've certainly been guilty of going down the rabbit hole of posting for posting's sake, being a bit thirsty, looking for the comments and likes. And it's only been the last 2, 3, 4 months where I've stepped back a little bit. Instead of posting every single day, I'm posting 3 or 4 times a day. I'm actually getting
times a week,
not a day. God, yes, get it right. But I'm actually getting a slightly less engagement, but much more enjoyment, fulfillment, and the reason why I'm doing it is actual clients from it as well. So my point is, I feel that if we're not careful, it can be to our detriment. What do you think?
I think you and I, because we've seen significant growth on LinkedIn, we've definitely surrounded ourselves in a network of people who are on there daily. They're commenting on 50, 100 posts a day. It's a very active network. And I think we have to take a step back and realize there's people who have just posted an article. They've posted, oh, we're hiring. There are other people on LinkedIn. And, it's not normal to go viral on a business platform. None of this is normal to be hitting 50, 70,000 followers because you're a business owner. I think social media has changed a lot, and sometimes we really need to reflect on how interconnected the world is. We've got followers from all over the world, but as you were saying there, going back to your question, what do I think of it? I used to post content that was unnecessary and very fluffy. It was simply for vanity metrics. There's one specific post I can remember where I was like, I'm not earning 6 figures a month. I'm not, I don't have an employee yet. These sort of listicles or lists of things that are very obvious, but that sort of post attracted other people who would resonate with the content. And that went viral. I think it got 2,000 likes, and it didn't create any comments. It didn't create any leads. It didn't generate any leads or clients. All it gave me was likes and impressions and followers.
Oh, totally.
And I had to take a step back there and go, why on earth am I spending 3-4 hours of my day engaging, writing content and messaging people on this platform if it's not putting money in my bank account? Took a step back and started writing to my target audience, writing to those leaders and CEOs, and actually having conversations with them about the pain points that they were struggling with. How were they communicating their mission? So I went away. I worked out what my tone of voice was, because I think I was very much finding complacency and comfort in a young voice who's growing and building their business. And I realized that I actually had authority to prove for myself, and authority in the personal branding and copywriting space. We achieve great things for our clients. So I took a step back, revisited my strategy, and I came back and things changed. I started seeing more calls booked, closing more business, because I actually took the position that I had to.
Well, it goes back to that purpose thing and the intention. For me, it's about, I ask the question, is this adding value? What is the purpose of this post? And don't get me wrong, of course, now and again you put a post out because you do want that bit of recognition, but when it becomes a selfie and a post all the time for like a pat on the back, I think you almost get to a stage where some people would they choose likes and comments over pounds? I think that you get so deluded with it that you actually lose track. So taking a step back, and for someone so young, not that is about age, to have that kind of approach to it, even though you've got 58,000 followers, you're growing, you're in the midst of it, and you're in that kind of zone, I think it's a very refreshing outlook.
What I will add there, which might be a little bit controversial, is I do think that following in some essence is a currency. Now, I'll add that having a number of followers and a top voice badge, which I recently got awarded at the beginning of this year, it has given me a lot of opportunities that I don't think I would have had if I didn't have those.
Of course.
And perhaps that's toxic in itself from the people who are making decisions, but it's led to me being invited abroad for keynote speaking events, to VIP conferences that I would never have been invited to.
Sure, I wouldn't say it's toxic, but I think it's about, I know people have got even bigger followers than us, and I can't see their purpose or their meaning. It's that they are doing it for the followers. Well, I think you are doing it for the followers to a certain extent. Of course, we all do that, but it's the outcomes behind that and the meaning and the purpose behind it. I think that's the difference.
Definitely. And going back to that purpose conversation earlier, I think I'm still discovering my purpose. With the number of followers that I have. I really want to make use of that to influence people in a positive way and a meaningful impact. I'm still learning about what I want to do with my life, where I want to be in 5 years' time. And I suppose what I'm doing is bringing people on that journey with me.
Going back to the money thing, there's people listening to this going to go, yeah, whatever, come on. You know, if you were a millionaire tomorrow, you take that tomorrow. I don't believe this shit about purpose over profit. What would you say to those sort of people?
So there is a conversation I had at the beginning of this week of, can you be purpose-driven and profit-driven? And actually, I think you can. Ultimately, for a business to be successful, there needs to be money in the bank account. Customers are king. We've got to pay the bills, pay the team, pay X, Y, Z. But underlying that money coming into the bank account, the decisions that you make as a business owner need to have values upheld against them. So the values and beliefs that you have, they need to be supporting the mission of your business or organization. I think it's possible to have both, definitely. Businesses that are solely purpose-driven can sometimes run the risk of turning into a non-profit,
like a crusade almost.
Exactly, or a charity or these sort of things. But that's a whole different conversation. Of there are so many social enterprises nowadays. In the last 5 years or so, since we've got a cost of living crisis, the pandemic, a lot of private businesses are standing up to the government now and offering that gap in the market for young people, for health, for education.
So, social media versus reality. I want to get your view on that. And I want to get your view on, do you feel that it's not a leading question or loaded question, do you feel that you portray yourself and act and behave in the same way you do online as offline?
I would say 95% yes. And I'm being honest with you there. I'm being authentic with you there, Chris. I think one of the best compliments that I've received from being on LinkedIn for the last 2 years is, Izzy, you are one of the most authentic people that I've met. I'm very honest with the mistakes that I make. I've been honest throughout my journey of the failures, the F-ups. But equally, I feel like that you don't need to show 100% of everything. I'm a 22-year-old. I travelled Asia at the beginning of the year, and I very much wanted to show that it's not just beach clubs, sunshine, surfing.
Absolutely right.
I got stopped by the mafia twice in two different countries. Just happened. We had to pay off some money. I've had delayed flights. I had immigration problems. I was stuck in a country illegally for 5 days. I shared that with LinkedIn because I wanted to prove to people that just because someone's a digital nomad doesn't mean that they're living the life of luxury. And I've tried that with my LinkedIn account in all aspects.
It's a real fine balance though, isn't it? I think sometimes, certainly from my personal experience, about being authentic, being open and, showing yourself warts and all, but also having the confidence to do that. And for fear of not being judged. And I'm sure you've had good days and bad days and weeks and months where you pretty much have the confidence to post anything. Sometimes I've had situations where I thought about posting it, deleting it. I'm kind of I get sucked into what people think, and it can be a difficult realm sometimes, can't it? What do you think?
I was that person who would delete a post if it only got 5 likes in about half an hour. I was that person, and I'll hold my hands up and say that. But I think once I changed my strategy, aligned it with the purpose, aligned it with the realistic goals that I had for being on LinkedIn, I stopped caring so much. I started to make sure that everything that was going up had a message conveyed that I wanted.
Because you intrinsically know it's this you want this, you mean this, that there's a meaning behind it, and it's almost, I don't necessarily care what people think, that I'm doing this because it's aligned to my values.
Exactly. I had a call with someone yesterday who said, Izzy, I'm too afraid to put this on LinkedIn, even though it's going to support our business launching. And I said to them, that is ultimate people pleasing. You have to realize on LinkedIn, there's 900 million people on there. You're not going to be everyone's cup of tea. The sooner you realize that, the better. I know that there's posts that I've put up over the last 2 weeks where I've had someone in the DMs going, you're wrong. How dare you put that up? Like, you're painting us all with the same brush. You're not going to be everyone's cup of tea, Chris.
On that point, you're right. I mean, you can't please everybody. I mean, I had a post that went super viral. I'm talking 21 million views, 300,000 likes, it had 4,000 reshares, 10,000 comments. Like, oh my God. I think I gained about 18,000 followers from that one post. And it was one of those before and after ones. It was a positive story. This is me before, this is me now. But even that, there was 5% of people that were literally horrifically direct and bad and bullying and trolling to me. And this was like, it's almost like you just can't. I think my mentality is that there's always going to be people attacking you.
See, that's a really healthy mentality to have, but unfortunately a lot of people who are only just starting to build their brands now, or on the door, perhaps on the fence, about, should I make one or not? And they're scared of those trolls. They're scared to put themselves out there. And I think when you wish to build your brand online, that's something you have to face. Now, I had a similar thing. Last year I posted about my burnout. And I do regret posting that. I posted last February.
You regret it?
In some ways, yes. So essentially the post was, I'm not looking after myself. I'm going to bed with my laptop under my pillow every night. I'm waking up to my laptop. Haven't left the house in 4 days, working, 20-hour days. I'm burnt out, and, this is me basically crying out for help. And I know so many people on the platform were going through the exact same thing. People in my business network, they were working too much, not looking after themselves. I put a post up, and I was very much in the early days of my account, so I didn't really understand that could have damaged my reputation. It got 2 million views, not quite 20 million, but still a viral post. And over the next few days, I had clients, prospects, people messaging, hope you're okay, Izzy. But also what I realized was all of the leads and prospects I'd been nurturing over the last few months through my content beforehand had seen this was basically a cry for help. Izzy is not reliable to work with.
Wow, right. Of course.
And I think that is the line there of authenticity and vulnerability.
It's difficult because going back to my post, I didn't get one lead or any business from it at all. Well, I've done other posts where I get 30 likes and get loads of business. But I think you're right. So we're talking about the kind of, in the realm of the crying CEO post. I'm sure you saw that with a guy, the CEO. So it's like, but I think that I'm a business coach and kind of life coach as well, and I do post quite a lot about my vulnerability and my suicide attempts, all this kind of stuff. And it's almost like, are we committing career suicide, for want of a better term? You can't use that term in that context. So, but I feel that people are going to judge you whether you're authentic or not, and it's very difficult not to get sucked into that. So my view is, it's about being myself. If someone asks me how I am, I won't say, I'm fine. If I'm not fine, I'll tell them. And if I'm having a day where I'm not feeling too great, I don't want to post every single time, but I think it's just about being real. And if that post you're talking about burnout, that doesn't make you a bad LinkedIn influencer or someone who shouldn't be trusted. It makes you a human being.
Exactly. And I think perhaps the reaction that I got made me regret it. But also what it did do, which was quite powerful, was start a conversation. Right. A lot of people were realizing, oh my God, I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm staying up till 4 a.m. creating content. I didn't quit my job, resign from my job to become a freelancer or a business owner, to be staying up all hours of the night to create content for X amount of pounds a month.
You often find that the people that are throwing the stones are the ones that aren't aware that actually it's happening to them. It's done to them. They wouldn't admit it, but it's difficult, right? But the thing is, you can't. I think on LinkedIn, you can't just be about business. You've got to be yourself. On the personal branding thing, I think there's a stigma around even the word personal branding,
definitely.
isn't there? What do you think?
I completely agree. And I sat down with someone recently and said, let's find another word for personal branding. And nothing really clicked. There's like digital reputation and, career portfolio, all of these things. But I think personal branding is here to stay. The word, it is a buzzword, but also so is everything else that has come in waves and trends recently. I think that it is the perfect word to use. I think that we just need to educate people and perhaps redefine what a personal brand means.
So who is your target audience then? Is it solopreneurs or is it businesses? And also how have you built your personal brand? I know you've touched on it. And if someone's got concerns over personal brand, what would you say to them?
Okay, so let's start with the first question. Then my target audience, that's CEOs and founders in the impact-led space.
Right.
So going back to the whole purpose conversation, I was just working with every CEO and founder under the sun, talking to anyone. And I realized, this marketing agency, I'm not really enjoying creating content for them. Our values don't seem to align and they're very much profit driven. Meanwhile, the next day I was having a conversation with someone who's combating a real problem that's going on in the world that's affecting us years to come, and they're challenging some problem. And I want to be involved in that impact. Perhaps I don't have the knowledge to create a business today to combat the problem myself, but to be able to be part of something where that person is communicating their mission, that's really meaningful to me. So that is how I found my niche of working with these people.
That makes sense.
So many different sectors and industries. Now, the next question there was, how did I build my brand? Now, I built my brand off a lot of mistakes, Chris. Started in 2021. I said, signed up to the platform, very confused about what this place was because I wasn't connected to anyone in the creative space. It was financial advisors, accountants, pension specialists, posting blog posts and, we're hiring announcements. That's all I thought LinkedIn was.
Okay.
And then I discovered a couple creators here. There was emojis in people's names. And I went, oh my God, how crazy is this? How wild. And I started posting and I started to gain traction. I think it's because not many people in the space perhaps were there yet. Everyone was still on Instagram and TikTok. So I started to build traction, networked with a lot of people, with business owners my age, but also ages above. Got on calls with people, gave educational content of things that I had learned in the space. I had been a blogger on Instagram for the last 2 years prior to that. And then, I just built up from there, posted my fair share of fluffy content. One post was I just gone ice skating at Winter Wonderland, fell on my ass. And I made a LinkedIn post out of that, which is very cringe to look back on, but it's all part of the journey.
Yes.
As I mentioned earlier, changed my strategy. Very much took that more authoritative approach. I really wanted to defeat the idea of my age defining me in the personal branding space. But also the marketing space, full stop.
That was my next question about that whole age thing. I had Catalina Valentino on my podcast, and she suffered quite a lot of abuse, I think purely because of her age. People wouldn't take her seriously, but I mean, she's probably achieved more than the people put together in some contexts. What challenges have you had with the age thing?
I haven't really publicly spoken about my age that much. I think perhaps my 21st birthday, I put up the typical photo of the balloons. And I think last December, I said, as a 21-year-old, I enjoy doing this, but equally I enjoy doing these things that many 21-year-olds who are still at university don't particularly enjoy. And I just gave a conversation about that. Now, I am not 21 anymore. I'm older than that, but I've realised that I allowed my age to define the challenges rather than other people, which might be different to what Catalina said. I allowed a stereotype or a perception of my age to take control and give me doubts for my career, which might be quite, it is self-sabotaging. I thought I can't charge a lot of money in comparison to perhaps 30, 40-year-old marketing agencies. because I didn't go to university and study this degree.
Mm.
I can't sell myself in a room to this many people because I'm 10 years younger than them.
Mm.
I am not going to be taken seriously on LinkedIn
So
because of
literally
my
talking
age.
yourself out of it.
100%.
Yeah.
And I realised this perhaps came from previous job experiences. I was the youngest there by a minimum of 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I constantly allowed my age to be the reason why I wasn't achieving a promotion.
Mm.
So for me, the challenges I've received with my age were because of that self-sabotage.
Right.
Now, heading into this year, I've really broken that down,
Yeah.
started going to therapy, and I think as a result of that, I've stopped letting my age define me. The results that we achieve for clients, the brand that I've built myself, that's come through maturity and learning
Yes.
over, oh, you're a 22-year-old, so you're not going to be good at this job.
You mentioned therapy there, and I'm sure you've listened to a few of my other podcasts. I do like to go quite deep, and we talked quite a lot about business already. We'll come back to that, but I'm sure the audience want to know more about the real you, your journey, your darkness, the times where you felt really, ill at ease with yourself and life and the world. So talk to us about kind of your journey since school and some of the dark times.
Okay. Going straight into that, Chris. Interesting. So this year in April, I was very much in my self-growth era, booked that one-way ticket to Asia, traveled Asia for 4 months. And in April, I spoke to a friend and she said, I've got a therapist whilst I've been traveling. Here's her email. Why don't you just have a call with her? And I stepped, into a co-working space in the middle of the Philippines.
Yeah.
And had a therapy call, my first ever therapy session. And ever since, every week or every 2 weeks, I've been having therapy sessions, breaking down perhaps any, limiting beliefs and traumas that I had built over the years. And very much have an open conversation with people that even though you might feel like your life is currently perfect or someone else is worse off than you, I think therapy is a great place to start discovering yourself. For context, in school, I was bullied, cyberbullied in year 7, and it very much held me back for perhaps the rest of my school years. Going into secondary school, I wanted to become a TV presenter. I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be something creative, talking. I loved getting up at the Christmas assembly and singing and talking and reading. And after that cyberbullying incident over several months in year 7, which we're going back to the age of 11, 12.
Wow, that's very young to have that, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I completely wiped out all ambitions that I had and all confidence. And I don't think that confidence really came back until I started my business at the age of 20.
So how did it affect you? Because at that age, it's hard to kind of quantify it. But now you're sort of older than that. How?
I think now that I've matured, I've understood the behaviours that I had throughout my teen years. So obviously I mentioned that I completely cancelled and refused to go forward with the dreams that I had. And I sometimes wonder what would life look like if I didn't have that, or I didn't face bullying, or I stood against that bullying. But obviously you can't ever look back in hindsight.
No.
I think that I wouldn't have got myself in perhaps friendships and relationships where people would walk all over me. I think that when you go through bullying, you do perhaps lose some self-respect for yourself. You become a people pleaser, and perhaps you get used to that idea of that perhaps is the way that people communicate love or communicate any, friendship towards you.
Yeah, you kind of get conditioned into believing that is you.
How people are.
That's your identity, and that's how people are. So the therapy helped, but were your parents around, friends around to help you, or did you kind of have to deal with it on your own up until, the therapy?
So my mum was very much my support throughout my years. My parents got divorced when I was about 8 months old. So very much had a single parent for majority, if not all of my life. My mum is my best friend. She actually helps me within my business. She was the person that pushed me to start my business and quit my job. She's always been there for me and helped me through these tough times.
How has the lack of a father figure affected your life?
So I chose to end the relationship with my father in my mid-teen years. I think if we're carrying on this topic of self-respect and growth, I think I realised in my late teen years that friendships and family relationships that weren't serving me and creating more anxiety in my life. If sorry, I cannot frame the sentence.
Yeah. For me, it's one of those where it's friends, families, lovers, partners. No one's out of the woods. If they're not serving me, you've got to do something about that. Is that what you're trying to say? Or
yeah, so essentially, I think I was learning as I was maturing and going through this healing era, this part of my life that was healing. I was learning that these people didn't deserve to be in my life, and they were actually creating more bad in my life than good.
It's very interesting what you're saying, because I don't think you would have learned that perspective and that healing and had the courage to then sort of say to your father, I don't want to be part of your life anymore, if you didn't go through the cyberbullying. I'm not saying cyberbullying is a good thing, but in many respects it's a lesson that's taught you some great perspective. What do you think?
Definitely. I think I read this somewhere in a book. I cannot remember, so I'm not going to give context, but apparently in life you're either the bully or the bully's victim. And I think that being that victim of these young girls who perhaps had their own insecurities taught me compassion, I will actually add, because ending this relationship with my dad, I realised that there are imperfections in this person that in a similar way the girls had. There are insecurities and perhaps worries in a person that makes them who they are, the actions and behaviours they have.
It feels like at the time it was impossible not to take that personally, but as you've matured, you've realised that if anyone attacks you now, it's not actually a personal thing against you. It's almost a reflection of themselves.
Definitely.
But it's hard to do that in that moment, isn't it?
It's definitely the struggle of being so self-aware. I think my therapist says this to me. I am too self-aware for my own good sometimes, which means that I tend to go down the logic route rather than facing the emotions and embracing and accepting something.
So talk to us about that, because I always talk about leadership quite a lot, and say that emotional intelligence is one of the most important things as opposed to IQ. Obviously, being qualified and going to university, all that kind of stuff, people have that route, and that's fine. But I think that emotional regulation, dealing with emotions, and feeling things like guilt, shame, anger. When I started to embrace those feelings, my life started to change, and I did start to live my life. What's your view on sort of tapping into those really dark emotions and that kind of side of things?
Those dark emotions of guilt and shame and anxiety really hit my life perhaps around 16 to 19 years old. I had struggled through quite a lot of friendships with my friend. We were friendship group. We were a group of 9 girls and an all-girls secondary school where obviously chaos is going to happen. But also in the period of when you get your first boyfriend, going to college and, involving and meeting all these different people, learning to drive. Learning to drive was probably one of the hardest points in my going into my adulthood life, and that's not come from a area of inadequacy or you're rubbish at driving, Izzy. That came from you're never going to be good enough. And it's quite interesting because I'm going to pin this action, this milestone in everyone's life. It is a milestone in many people's lives as the place that revealed to me that I needed help. I went through several driving instructors, which sometimes I can be embarrassed to say, like, oh, yeah, I went through 4 driving instructors.
I passed on my 4th attempt, so you're not alone.
Me too. But beyond the, steering and all of that, getting inside a car, I found really uncomfortable. And there was like a voice sitting on my shoulder saying, you're not going to ever be good enough to do this.
Right.
And I actually had to go to hypnotherapy to deal with this.
Is that voice completely gone in general?
Probably not.
Do you think it ever will go away?
I think it will shrink, and the voice perhaps on this shoulder or the voice in my head will echo, will shout above it, will be the louder voice. I think it's always going to be there. The same way with these 7, 8, 9-figure CEOs, they always have imposter syndrome at some point in their journey. But I think that voice really was prominent in those years. And going into my business, I had to really go and, flick it off and really say no to it.
It's almost like I've done some posts this week about fear, and actually my post today was about fear being, people bang on about fear being a negative thing, but actually if you embrace it, easier said than done, it can actually be the fuel. And I think I get that voice as well, the negative. It was almost like almost befriending it and going, I know you're there. Sometimes that voice can actually be a voice of reason in a way, because I don't know, have you had a moment in your life where, because you've gone through success where you've almost got too cocky or too complacent, and that voice has helped you? Or give us some examples where that kind of stuff's happened to you.
I think I started my business out of fear.
Right.
I was working at an accountancy firm. I had the opportunity for a promotion. I had just come out of the pandemic, so everything was pretty safe. Obviously, in a finance industry, accounts industry, during the pandemic, it was a safe, secure company. But I was scared because I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't fulfilling the person that I was and the skill set and talent that I had as an individual. I had just left a 3.5-year relationship from, my first boyfriend, my first...
Did you leave him?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that came from fear as well.
Talk to us about that.
Oh, I'm not sure if I want to.
Okay.
But going on the fear conversation, I think a lot of actions that I made at the end of the pandemic, ending a relationship, starting a business. I even started going to the gym, which I think in a young girl's life, if that's not something that you're normalized to, entering a gym full of men and boys can be quite intimidating.
Of course.
And I decided to embrace all of this discomfort, registering a business on Companies House, all of these things. I embraced the discomfort there and went forward with it because I knew that I wasn't fulfilling what I set out to be.
Yeah, I was going to talk to you about relationships. I asked all my guests about relationships. For me, what happened to me when I was kind of abandoned, a bit like you, I had a single parent kind of, it did affect my relationships, my ability to trust myself or trust the other person, all that kind of stuff. So in general terms, rather than being specific, then perhaps, how has your previous traumas affected your relationships, would you say?
I think that the relationship that I had with my parents when I was younger definitely determined what my relationships did and continue to look like. I think also that the communication skills that I've built up since leaving my job has bled into the relationships I have with friends and, lovers and partners. And I'm really proud of that healing stage that I went through, because perhaps Izzy before would be insecure. The attachment style would be insecure 100%. There was a lack of trust because the relationship I had with my father bled straight into the relationships I had with boys.
Course. That's understandable.
And going through that stage of discovering my identity, feeling secure within myself, embracing who I was and putting me at the center of my universe, that led to healthy relationships where communication was there, intimacy was there, and sort of hope was there also.
Because that word healing, I mean, it's I think we're all still healing, aren't we? But just give us some more context around your healing journey then. You say you put yourself first, but what have you done?
I will jump straight in there and say at the beginning of 2023, two of my best friends went traveling in Asia, and they gave me their flat to live in for 3 months just to house sit. Really beautiful flat. Yes. Really beautiful flat, not hat. And I was loving it. That freedom, that independence. And only a few months later, I was going to be traveling myself. And what happened there was business got really busy. I was having about 5 to 10 calls a day, which is ridiculous. I wasn't eating. I was perhaps living off caffeine and got in a very unhealthy habit of nicotine.
Right.
I lost a lot of weight significantly, but other days, perhaps at the weekend, I would binge on sugar. I stopped going to rugby training, which was something that I felt really passionate about. I stopped going to the gym with my best friend, and I hated getting out of bed. I think 11 o'clock in the morning, I'd get out of bed for my first meeting. And although the business was thriving and everything was delegated and being done amazing, I struggled. I really struggled. And only until I got on that plane to Asia,
Mm-hmm.
did I realize that that was depression?
Absolutely.
And I was really scared of that word because I was like in denial. No, that's not me. I've always been happy. And I think 2 weeks into my travels, it took till then to really settle in. The first few days, I wouldn't talk to anyone. I was so scared to walk up to someone and be like, "Hi, my name's Izzy. What are you doing?"
Yeah.
I'm in a foreign country in another continent, 9,000 miles from home. But I met a group of people who had similar beliefs, similar values to me. And I went and spent a week with them and spoke about everything.
Sure.
Struggles, doubts, our lives, the families that we had, the struggles they're facing in business, but also just in their jobs. And I think that unlocked something in me and made me realize that who I am as a person, I am drawn to meaningful conversations. That is perhaps a way that I heal. That's a way that I learn to reflect inward and focus on perhaps the struggles that I have as an individual, the doubts that I have, the limiting beliefs. And I really worked hard with a friend of mine to reframe these limiting beliefs into empowering thoughts and affirmations. And although it's very cliche and a lot of people talk about it, turning those limiting thoughts and experiences I had from the age of perhaps 6 onwards up until today, I relearned myself, rediscovered Izzy's actually a really limitless person. And that word limitless became my key word throughout all of my traveling.
It's almost a rewiring of yourself, isn't it? Kind of undoing and then rewiring yourself. And I think that depression is a word that there's a big taboo about it, but I think it's very, very common. And I think you've articulated it very well and people will resonate with that. Just on that point, I think people who are suffering from depression, and it's never a one-size-fits-all answer, just to caveat it, but what general steer, guidance or advice would you give anyone who might be suffering that kind of thing at the moment?
I think it's really difficult to give a piece of advice on that because everyone's journey is obviously different, as you mentioned. And obviously one of the first things you say is to speak to people. But often that is really difficult. That is the hardest part of going to someone and saying, "Hey, I'm struggling." There are a couple of things that I really found helpful, which was tapping back into what gives me structure in my day. So whether that's setting an alarm at 6:30 in the morning, going to the gym with my friend, or making a bar of oats before my first meeting, putting structure back into my day made me feel human again, rather than, an enigma.
That's really sound. It's almost like going back to basics and having some small wins.
Definitely small wins, but also something that I still keep up today is journaling. When in a time of stress and overwhelm, I make sure that those thoughts of mine are put onto paper, or even there's an app called Journify where you can speak your thoughts. Often being neurodivergent and everything, I speak way too quickly or think too quickly for my pen to follow and get quite impatient with journaling. So that's a great app, or just voice memos. But ultimately, I think talking to people really does save lives. And I think it stops depression turning into something far greater. But often, you can be hiding. I hid it through all of my content. You look like there was Izzy. It looked like Izzy. There's a thriving business there. There's a happy smile on all those calls. I hid it all and I didn't tell anyone. And my friends had no idea.
That's the point. I think I've done a post or two and I've seen your post about, someone suffering from mental health challenges or depression. They could be the smiling one. They could be the happy one. It affects everyone. And what you see on social media is not often the reality. And I think it's about checking in with yourself. But I'm and other people. But I'm like you. I don't necessarily like the small talk, and I think sometimes, social media can lead to just kind of like very surface level conversations. I'm not trying to be disparaging of social media because it's very important. It's a great thing, but building meaningful relationships and having that purpose, I think that. I think again to reiterate that point, I think it's so important. And I'm so impressed with someone of your age, not that it's about age, that understands that. When did you first kind of you might have already said so, but when did you first discover like actually meaning, purpose is important to me?
I think when I turned 18, and obviously you were able to drink alcohol, and all people my age started going clubbing.
Yeah.
I'm from down south of England, so Brighton is the
Oh,
closest
right.
place
Yeah.
to go clubbing.
Yeah.
And I hated it. The loud music, the drinks, the shots, everything.
Right.
And I think I told myself I loved it for a few years or whatever. But I realized that there's no conversation there. It's music and, blasting music and lights. And I really missed and I lacked that conversation over perhaps a bar or going for a walk. I think I thrive off tranquility and fresh air and nature. I feel completely grounded. But also Asia really reminded me that. And one thing I wrote at the end of my journal entry when I came home from the Philippines was, regardless of me stopping traveling and coming back to the UK, I've learned that it's not the physical location that will provide you joy. It is the people that you surround yourself with.
Absolutely.
The meaningful conversations come from the people that you align your interests and beliefs with. And I know for a fact that that's possible in the UK.
Sure.
I just need to make sure that I find those people. I need to, obviously, as you mentioned there, the surface level conversation of social media. I think there's an opportunity to be able to learn people through social media and say, hey, let's not talk over WhatsApp, let's not voice note, let's meet up in person, let's go for a coffee or a co-working day, whatever it may be.
I think as well it goes back to kind of the whole materialistic thing. I mean, I used to be very materialistic. I used to have like Range Rovers and houses and all these bloody things, and I lost it all, and it actually done me favour, because I'm not saying that I don't like nice things. I think everyone does, but experiences are the most valuable thing I think you can have in terms of wealth. There's wealth to me isn't just about finances, right?
I think that 4-month trip, no matter how expensive it was, they say Asia's really cheap, but when you're there for 4.5-5 months, that bank account's screaming at you a little bit. But I think perhaps my top 3 life moments of all time over these 22 years have been from those 4 months.
Wow.
I met my now partner there. I met some best friends from all over the world there. I found my confidence. I changed my life, and I had full control of that. That was a responsibility I gave myself leaving England in January. And I think it was the best, that was the best medicine, the most expensive therapy session that I've had, but the most rewarding and life-changing. And for that, I am entirely grateful.
So, you talked about that depression. Would you say that was your darkest moment, or was there a rock bottom as well? Or
I think there haven't been rock bottoms yet. I think there have been deep moments that have definitely been lessons for me over the last 2 years. So I started the business in around May 2021. And I think there have been 3 core moments over those 2.5 years where they've been huge lessons for me. Perhaps burnout, should have delegated earlier. Lack of purpose. Okay, I need to take a step back and look at the work I'm doing, and is this providing me, purpose and fun in my life? Not just fun, but is it rewarding for me? And then, coming back from Asia, I think I realised that there is so much more to life than sitting in a co-working space all day. And I wanted to do more. And I'm working on that now. There's more that I want to do. There's more than a personal branding agency that I have in mind.
That's my next question. What is the future looking like for you?
Oh, great question. And I can't give a solid answer yet. I've been thinking a lot over the last few weeks of what the future looks like. As this conversation has gone on, I'm really someone who thrives off purpose and meaningful conversations. And I do envisage in the next few years, whether 3 or 5 years, creating something, whether it's a community, a space, a event, whatever it may be, something that is consistent and repeating, where people can come together and have those meaningful conversations. Because at the beginning of my business, I wish there was that, and perhaps I hadn't found it yet. But for me, that would be super rewarding. I don't want to earn money off it. I don't want to make it bigger than it has to be, but I want there to be that safe haven where people can go to. They don't even need a business. I think it needs to become more than our occupational label of me being a founder, me being a leader or a C-suite exec. It's where people can go to and have those conversations.
So that's a really impactful answer, because if you ask that to many people, they'll be like, well, I want to get that promotion, or and I'm not wronging or writing anyone, but I think it's about, what I'm getting from you is you want to have an impact on people's lives. You want to do something that's going to leave a legacy without sound. But people think that, whatever, mate, no one's going to remember when you die. But I believe that, I've certainly believe now that you can have purpose. You can have everything. You can have the money. You can have the purpose. You can have all of it. And I think that until you tap into that meaning and that purpose, it doesn't matter how much money you have or how much wealth or followers or whatever you have. I don't think you're ever going to be truly happy, actually. What do you think?
No, I don't. I think for me, the freedom that money provides is more important than, as you mentioned earlier, like the cars, the houses, the watches, the jewelry. Coming away from my travels this year, I realized that I want to be able to be doing this for my life and my future family. That the experiences are these things. Ultimately, like, we're all social creatures. We crave materialism, but equally, sometimes we need to look in ourselves and go, are we wanting this because social media is showing this to us and it's called that keeping up with the Joneses? Or do we want this because it actually is serving a purpose for us and serving some sort of result that we crave?
No, absolutely. So what makes you angry? What pisses you off?
Oh God. What makes me angry? Where do I start, Chris? No, I'm joking. I think people who are lazy, and I'm not saying that in people who are just on their asses all day. I think when there are people with talent, real talent, and ideas in their head, and they're not going out there and achieving those goals, they're not taking the step and going into that discomfort. And I think that might be really reflective and projecting of Izzy, who was working in a corporate job, sitting in an office, spending way too long in the kitchen making a coffee because she hated her job. I want people to be going out and doing what they need to do and what they deserve to do than sitting and choosing the easy option.
So just talk about that very quickly, because we're coming to the end of it. I wish we had another couple of hours, actually. But you didn't follow the archetypal route of going to university, right? Or going into the work. Well, mate, just talk to us about kind of from 16 onwards. How have you arrived to where you are?
It's a zigzag road. Wanted to study biology at university. Went and sat down at someone in my school library and they went, so why do you want to do biology? And I was like, oh, I don't actually know. I'd rather do politics. Went and did politics at A-level. Actually, I really wanted to be a linguist, but threw that off. Right. And then sat down in my college tutor room and they said, let's do your personal statement, Izzy. And I went, I don't want to do it. And I don't know what was saying that to me, whether it was that laziness that I went back to, I'd said a few moments ago, or it was something inside of me going, university is not for me. A-levels and GCSEs completely wrecked my mental health. I was not naturally academic. I was hardworking academic.
Why did they affect your mental health? Sorry.
I would study I'd get home at 3:30, 4 p.m. and be studying until 11 p.m. and then go to bed. Right. I was an intelligent person, but that came from hard work and not just, I know the answer. I put the effort in, and it completely wrecked my mental health over those years because that's just what life was defined as. And the idea of doing that for 3, 4 or more years, that scared me. But equally, I knew that there was more to me than perhaps a degree. I didn't like that academic route. And I think I was a very creative individual and doing something that I had control over and I had, a roadmap to work towards. That lit a flame up inside me.
Yeah, and I think that is the issue with the education system. I think we're forced into conformity, aren't we? I think it does stifle creativity, and I think that you're a shining example. You used the word, when I asked you who you are, you said a purpose-led entrepreneur. And I think some people, entrepreneur at 22, it's right. But how do you define entrepreneur? Because it's a well-used word now, right?
Yes. How would I define entrepreneur? I think there is a difference between a business owner and entrepreneur. And I think a business owner is someone who that's their identity, and that's their identity solely. So, they're running this business, going home to their kids, whatever it may be. Next day, they wake up at 6 a.m. and they continue being a business owner.
The focus is that business, yeah.
Whilst I think an entrepreneur has these core values running through their veins when they wake up, when they go to sleep, there's always something bigger to be doing and achieving in the workplace, in their business.
Yeah.
And I think that if they perhaps are an entrepreneur of multiple businesses, these core values run amongst all. And perhaps that entrepreneur has an underlying mission.
Absolutely. And just kind of last couple of questions. How important do you think values are in business and in life? And just give us a couple of your values as well.
Ridiculously important. I think, like, if you look at a personal brand, every public persona that we see have values, and their content is written off these values.
Yeah. Or should be.
Should be, definitely. The honest ones, the authentic ones.
Yeah.
When you go to a networking event, the reason you are drawn towards a particular individual is because of the values they are communicating through their body language, their voice, the conversations they're having, the way they introduce you to people. For me, my values, I'm a very honest person, and I will stand up for myself where relevant. Perhaps those school years of being a pushover and people pleaser, they are far behind me, because I've realised that I need to give myself the respect that I deserve before anyone else does.
Sure.
Other values? Well, you're really making me rack my brain here, Chris, because usually I should just spill out. But I really believe in integrity and, putting other people first. If we tap into my purpose, I love helping people, changing one person in a small amount or changing people in many ways. But to be able to give someone that handhold that I needed when I started a business, when I was in school, when I was being bullied, I want to provide that to people on a friendship, family, or business level. And I think that value will always run through me in life.
That's absolutely superb. Very, very powerful, very, very insightful, very impressive. I know for a fact that there's so much ahead of you, and what you could achieve is astronomical, I think. But in terms of the current 16 to 20-year-old person who wants to become an entrepreneur or entering the social media realm or whatever, what kind of tips, advice would you like to give?
I would say find a mentor. And I think that's quite a generic piece of advice there, but there will be a lot of mistakes that you make in the early days where you're overworking, you are choosing the wrong decisions because perhaps money is there's quick cash rather than long-term investment. There is going to be someone, whether it be 5 years ahead of you, 10 years, 20 years, someone who's done the exact same thing as you, but they've made mistakes and they can teach you that. But I'd say equally, have some obsession towards what you're doing, and that might be taken as perhaps a toxic perception. But when you believe in your mission and believe what you've got to do, go forward with it, but also realise that can change over time.
This might be a bit of a left field question, because you put a post out only yesterday, and it was talking about suicide. I'd like to just ask you about that. What was the reason for posting that, and what's your thoughts on that subject?
Interesting. So on social media, we see the International Women's Day. Here's the top 10 women you should be following. It's Black Lives Matter. It's Black Lives Awareness Month. I don't see any conversations about suicide, and perhaps the algorithm might penalize you for that. People feel uncomfortable about that conversation. How dare you bring that conversation on a professional business network? But it's something that affects every single one of us, whether it's ourselves where we've had thoughts, or people in our families, people in our friendship groups and circles. Business is stressful. We are currently in a cost of living crisis. Lives are difficult, and we've got the Great Resignation happening right now. There's so much going on in our lives where there's a lack of stability, and it's very fragmented. I don't think there is a more important time to be having these conversations. And although this month is of September is Suicide Prevention Month, every month should be a conversation here. I don't think I ever had that conversation in the workplace about stress, mental health, depression, suicide. No conversation. It was swept under a rug if you were feeling like shit. Sorry, excuse my French.
That's fine. Yeah.
But if you felt uncomfortable in a bad way, take it home. That's personal.
Totally. I mean, I've lost 3 friends to suicide, and I've talked about it quite a lot on and I commend you for bringing that up and opening it up, because it's going to take more people like you and I to keep doing this, because it is becoming very, very common. And how else are we going to tackle it other than tackling it?
I think there's so many conversations that are being swept under the rug these days, and perhaps that's because people are very self-centered in their, oh, my LinkedIn account has to only talk about my business because I need leads. If I talk about anything else, that's taken away from my business. But I think we have to realize that we are human beings, and these conversations need to happen. And when you open a gate of that sort of conversation, like this one yesterday, you're demonstrating people that you're human and you understand the struggles of life.
Totally.
And that creates trust within people. And whatever the byproduct of that being, that trust.
Why would you want to do business with people who are against that anyway?
So true. So true. I think there have been conversations where I've had a discovery call with someone. Very quickly, they've revealed their true colours.
Yes.
And I've turned around and gone, I'm unsure if this business relationship is compatible. And that in the early days, that felt quite scary to say, because that's money you're throwing away.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if you have values and you want to uphold them, why should you be taking on people like that?
Just quickly, you mentioned about going into the gym full of men. On that point, what do you think men can do more of to help women, and vice versa? What do you think women could do more of to help men?
Interesting. So are we being specific here in terms of that gym environment?
No, not in general. In general.
So there are specific conversations in the workplace that we could be really having with men, but also for women.
Yeah.
So calling out sexism, for example, I worked in a workplace where the women were seen as whingers. They were nagging. They were the bossy boots. Yeah, if a man was like that, they'd never receive an insult or a nickname or anything like that. And I think there really needs to be an overall there of, this is what a manager looks like regardless of gender.
Absolutely.
And I think I walked away from that job going, I can't speak up for myself or be assertive because I'm going to be a nagger. I'm going to be called a bitch. And it put a little bit of fear in me of, can women not stand up for themselves? And that's across relationships here.
Sure.
I think women are seen as the more emotional creatures. And I think that we have to embrace that. We have to embrace the fact that perhaps we are more emotional.
But why is that a negative?
Exactly. And I think for me, I'm a lot more compassionate, empathetic person than perhaps if you take my brother, for example. And I thrive off that. That helps me be a better business owner, a better manager, a better friend, a better girlfriend, all of these things.
Of course.
I love the fact that I'm empathetic, and I used to hate it. I'd say I'm too sensitive. I'm never going to be good enough for XYZ, because I'm too emotional. But nowadays, I see it as, it helps me, especially in business, personal branding. I'm able to encapsulate someone's tone of voice so much better because I actually can put my feet in their shoes. And that's something to, embrace and accept.
Absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Just before we go very, very quickly, it's a silly question really, but where's the best place for people to find you?
On LinkedIn, Izzy Prior. I'm also starting to post on Instagram again, which is Izzy Prior Talks. That's the handle. Thank you, Chris. I absolutely love this conversation, and
Thank you. Proud to have you on the show.